Okay.
So carry on, and I'm gonna hold on to this, and you can ask some questions. It's just
Okay.
Gwen in the video, so shoot.
I feel like I've been put on the spot right away.
All of a sudden, because we can edit some of this.
Okay.
But well, now you know what, I'll start. So why don't you tell about Gwen, how you got started, where your interest came to join the Navy?
My father had been in the Navy for about 23, 24 years. My uncle was also in the Navy for about 22 years. My brother went into, when I was 16 years old, when he was 16, went into the Army. My aunt was in the Air Force during the war. My mom had been a nurse before the family came along. So my original idea was I was going to be a Navy nurse. The reason that I was really strong about the Navy was when I was supposed to be upstairs in bed sleeping, I would sit at the top of the stairs and listen to Dad trade Navy stories with some of his buddies downstairs. So I thought, hey, that's a lot of adventures. So that's what really sparked the interest. I wanted to be like my daddy. The plan to be a Navy nurse changed when I was part of the St. John Ambulance Cadets in Windsor, Ontario. And we'd won a competition, and we got a tour of Hotel Dieu, which is the hospital there. We went all through the hospital, and while we were in the emergency room, a little kid came in, and he had to have stitches around his eye, and they ended up giving me oxygen. So I figured, okay, forget the nurse part, we'll just do with the Navy. So that's what brought all that about. But from as long as I can remember, I always wanted to go into the Navy.
Tell us what that process was like for you to join the Navy, and what happened with the training, and what you were expecting in the beginning.
I had a pretty good idea of what to expect because of Dad being in the military. So I knew about the discipline. I knew that it was rigid, and it's, even though for most of my life, my brother and sister left home early. So for most of the time, I was like an only child because I was quite a bit younger than them. But I knew that there was going to be, bunking together, and it was going to be like a community type affair. So it wasn't a shock to me to all of a sudden go and, you've got to bunk with like 8 girls in the same room, or, you have all this communal living. So that was it. I think I was better prepared than a lot of girls were for that type of thing because of the background I had. I wanted to join as soon as I turned 18. But, actually, as soon as I got out of high school, but I had to wait. I didn't turn 18 till August, and then I had to wait till the next enlistment was coming in, and that wasn't until October. So I was, champing at the bit to get away, or to join. And so I went into Ottawa, signed up there, and there was one other girl along with myself that left for Ottawa by train. We were supposed to meet up with other potential Wrens in Montreal, and then all travel together by train to Cornwallis. As I said, I like my father's stories about adventure and so on. And as Judy and I were arriving in Montreal, didn't realize that there were 2 stations. And as our train was coming in, another one was going out, and I poked her in the ribs and said, wouldn't that be funny if that was our train? And it was. We missed our connection, had to stay overnight in Montreal. As luck would have it, my brother was in the Army and was stationed in Montreal, and he and his wife had an apartment there. So I phoned the recruiting office, told them what had happened, and that we had a place to stay, so they didn't have to make arrangements and so on. And they made arrangements for us to get the train the next morning and so on. So we went to stay at my brother's place, and I phoned up my dad that night, and I said, hey, Pop, guess what? Only in the Navy the first day, and I'm already in trouble. But yeah, we got to the basic training the next day, and there wasn't really anything, it was smoothed over. It was everything was okay. We didn't get into trouble too much that day. So,
Tell us about basic training.
well, there were 31 girls in our group. We were called Conestoga 23. We were the 23rd class to go through. We stayed in a building called Conestoga Block. We were put into sort of 3 divisions, and each division would have a turn at having a watch where they'd do rounds every day, and that was the big thing at night. You'd have to be the one to go around and make sure that the next person that was on duty was awake and ready, and you had to be careful because it's funny, some people, you can go up to them and shake them and wake them, that's no problem. Some others, you have to stand at the door because they'll come up fighting. They just wake up that way.
These are girls.
You got to know which ones were which. We had to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you'd hear this announcement, "Wakey, wakey, rise and shine." That's the way we got up. We had 20 minutes to get washed, dressed, make sure our beds were, completely straight, wrinkle-free, the whole thing, and muster outside our quarters. Now, muster is where we would all gather out in front of our quarters. We'd be in rows of 3, and we'd have to sort of, you shuffle and you get the certain space between each person, then we'd march to where we had to go. First off, it would be to march breakfast. Then, but anywhere, you didn't walk on the base. You marched everywhere. Some mornings when we came back, we would have, and quite often we'd have inspection. We'd have to have kit musters, where we'd have to lay out on our beds all the equipment and clothing and so on that we had, and it had to be rolled a certain way, and everything we had to have our name and serial number on it. So we got quite expert at embroidering. It was red embroidery thread that we had to put, and if it was something that you couldn't stitch, then it was stenciled. And we had to have this on everything, and everything had to be laid out in the proper order, so that when your duty officer came around and they could see that it was all laid. And if it wasn't laid out right, or if things weren't done properly, the names weren't on all of the items or so on, then you were up for punishment. Quite often, for me, the punishment usually was cleaning the heads. Now, in the Navy, the head is the washroom, the toilet. So that's, you usually were cleaning something. And garbage cans, toilets, whatever had to be done. We spent our time in the evenings cleaning things, or getting our kits all ready, or polishing shoes. You didn't have a heck of a lot of free time because you went to bed at a reasonably early time because you had to be up at 6, up and out the door, kind of thing. We had several uniforms. When we were issued our kits, we had several different types of uniforms. The one that is here that you see is that was our number 1 uniform, which the serge, Navy serge jacket and skirt. We had black nylons, the sort of Navy Oxfords that had about an inch heel on them. We had a white shirt. Now, I've noticed even when I went back from our reunion and I saw one of the uniforms on display in the museum, it was even different from what we wore, because it was a white shirt that the collar was attached. When I was in, we had a starched collar that was attached with collar studs to our shirt. And we had to, of course, wear the long ties. That's where we all learned to tie the Windsor knot. No clip-ons were allowed. Our best uniform, our dress uniform, was called our number 1, and it had the Canada flashes, and any badges or anything on it were all in gold. Our number 2 was our everyday uniform, and all those items were in red. We had what we called our number 5 uniform, which was our work uniform, and I don't know if you've seen the sailors. They have the short sleeve white Dutch shirt that's got the square collar with the blue around it. We had that. That was part of, and dungarees.